everybody. Welcome to today's WCET webinar. We'd love to hear where you are and what's happening. We finally have a cool down here in Colorado. It's been extra hot, and then we've had a nice cool down and moisture all week. So very happy about that. I'm Megan Raymond. I lead programs, events, membership, and sponsorship here at WCET, and it's great to see so many new and familiar names in the chat today. We are recording this, and we will be sharing a link to the recording and any resources that were shared later next week. And as we go through the presentation today, make sure that your questions end up in the question box. They tend to get lost if they're in the chat, and we don't want to miss your question. Here's our commitment to accessibility. You're welcome to scan the QR code. And today's webinar is AI Policy and Practice, WCET Survey Insights. And our moderator today is WCET's Executive Director, Dr. Van Davis. Please welcome Van.
Thanks, Megan. Good morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are. We are thrilled for you to be with us today for this discussion about institutional AI policies and practices. As Judith will talk about here in a minute when she goes over the study and the results of the survey, as well as recommendations. This is an update of a survey that we did a couple of years ago. We were really interested in seeing how things had progressed, where things had progressed, and where things were staying more or less static. So we have some interesting insights to share with you from the survey, but we also have some interesting insights to share with you from the institutional perspective. So we've got two great representatives from institutions that I'm going to ask to introduce themselves here in a moment. And then I'll have Judith introduce herself and talk a little bit about the survey. But Sam, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Van, and thank you for having me, and thanks to Judith for putting this wonderful report together. My name is Dr. Samuel Jay. I am the Executive Director of Digital Learning at MSU Denver, as well as the Professor of Communication Studies. So for those who aren't aware and can't tell from my background, we are a regional comprehensive university in downtown Denver.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Dr. Cynthia Pascal. I'm the Associate Vice President of e-learning at Northern Virginia Community College. If you're not familiar with NOVA, we are the second largest community college in the nation, and we host the sixth largest online community college population. So we are big, we are bureaucratic, and we have a lot to say on this very specific topic.
And I'm Judith Sebesta, and I'm the founder and principal of Sebesta Education Consulting, LLC. I support innovation and transformation across the higher education ecosystem. And I'd really like to thank WCET for giving me the opportunity to support this research for the second time in a row. As Van had mentioned, the first AI survey that we conducted was in 2023 and now in 2025. And I'm very excited to be able to share some of those data with you.
Well, Judith, why don't you walk us through the report and give us a little bit of an idea of some of the recommendations there at the end before we get the institutional perspective.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. So my agenda for my brief presentation today is to first give you a snapshot of the survey respondents and then dive into the key findings and insights from the survey data, including use of AI, support incentives and training on AI, policies and guidelines around AI, and the challenges and benefits when engaging in AI policy and practice. And I'll finish up this brief portion of our webinar today by talking about some of the recommendations that we discovered from those data. We had 224 total respondents from a range of institutions across the country. I also interviewed 7 higher ed professionals from diverse institutions, including Sam and Cynthia, who you'll be hearing from a little bit more in a moment. Thank you so much, Sam and Cynthia, for agreeing to interview. And then what we found from the data was that the largest number of respondents in terms of institutional type were at 2-year public institutions, but not too far behind that were respondents who were at 4-year public institutions that primarily offer baccalaureate degrees. And then you can see from there, almost 22% were from private and nonprofit universities. Next slide. In terms of enrollments, the largest majority of respondents are from large institutions of at least 10,000 enrollments in fall of 2024, and then 29% at 3,000 to 10,000 or 9,999, and you can go from there. Next slide. Here you can see in descending order of frequency the primary respondent roles, beginning with 20% of respondents being faculty members, and then we had 14% who are instructional learning designer or engineers, and 12% who are chief online learning distance education officers, and Center for Teaching and Learning Effectiveness, deans or associate deans, and then CAOs, instructional officers, and provosts. Now let's dive into some of the key findings and insights. And then when the report does come out, you'll be able to read about these in much more detail. A majority of institutions indicated that they are at a slightly mature stage of AI use. And what we found was that instruction and learning is, perhaps not surprisingly, the most prominent area of use. But since the last survey, we found that AI use to support operations and governance is expanding. And compared to the 2023 survey data, there's a notable increase in AI adoption and strategic planning. Lack of knowledge among administrator staff, and especially faculty, is the primary reason some institutions are not using AI. In terms of support, incentives, and training, we discovered that faculty champions play a crucial role in supporting effective AI adoption, even as skepticism among faculty about AI efficacy does continue. However, we also found that dedicated AI task forces and committees are nearly as important as faculty in supporting AI initiatives, and these are proliferating across campuses. A majority of institutions still, though, do not offer incentives to encourage AI use, although there's been an increase from the previous survey in institutions that do offer incentives such as stipends or release time, etc. Training for faculty, maybe unsurprisingly, is more prevalent than training for other campus groups, perhaps suggesting a focus on AI use in instruction and learning on the campuses. Nearly 1/3 of respondents reported that their institution does not offer training for students, which, as we talk about a little more in the report, is a little bit concerning, or maybe a lot concerning. Next slide. Here you can see a graphic of the maturity of policy development that we discovered through the survey data. A majority of surveyed institutions either have existing policies or are developing AI policies. So nearly 70% of institutions indicated that they are doing one or the other. Next slide. And in terms of policies and guidelines, we saw that there's been a noticeable increase in the number of institutions with established AI policies since our 2023 survey. However, some institutions indicated that they're choosing more flexible and adaptable guidelines and frameworks over more rigid policies. Policies and guidelines around academic integrity and plagiarism are the most common type of AI policy, perhaps again, not unsurprisingly. This shows a substantial growth, though, from the previous survey, indicating a rapid increase in such policies from 2 years ago. Interestingly, responses suggested a possible tension between faculty autonomy in developing and implementing classroom policy and the need for adoption of more holistic, campus-wide policies and guidelines. And then some of the challenges and benefits that were expressed through the survey data, as well as the interviews, were that institutions continue to struggle with insufficient AI knowledge among staff and faculty, as well as widespread distrust and skepticism towards the AI technologies. And concerns around academic integrity and plagiarism remain significant and consistently high, demanding ongoing attention and solutions to address this concern. Here was the new finding in the survey this year, and the environmental impacts of AI are emerging as a new and, for many, significant issue for higher education to address. And the report goes into more detail about what exactly those environmental impacts and concerns are at our campuses. Then, while teaching critical digital skills was the top benefit of AI identified in 2023, efficiency is now seen as the most frequent benefit, showing a focus on practical AI applications across institutions. And just in general, there's a rapid acceleration of AI integration at our campuses. So finally, some recommendations that we are making based on the survey data and the interviews. There's more detail about these in the report, but this is just a very quick, high-level overview of 10 recommendations. Develop comprehensive policies and/or guidelines, depending on what suits your campus context the best. Invest in AI literacy and fluency training. Establish support structures. Offer incentives for AI use across campus. Coordinate AI use across the curricula. Address the challenges proactively that you may have on your campus, and of course, promote ethical and equitable use. There's a need to expand student training, particularly given that so many students apparently are not being provided training on a number of the campuses. Leverage AI for operational efficiency, not just for instructional and learning use, and encourage experimentation of AI on your campuses. Hopefully, Van will be talking a little bit more about when the report might be available to you, but I will turn it back to Dr. Davis now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Judith. And actually, we published the report last week. We will put a link to the report in the chat. But I think what I'd like to do is start with you, Cynthia, and maybe both you and Sam could talk a little bit about the AI journey on your campus.
Absolutely. So the AI journey on my campus probably reflects a lot of what's going on just in higher education in general. There are the early adopters who are very experimental, like to play, like to dive headfirst into everything they see. As soon as a tool is announced, they are in and they are publicizing it. There are the no-nevers who are like, in no way, shape, or form will there ever be AI. Not on my watch. And then there's kind of everybody in between, right? And I think about it as a learning curve, right? We're trying to get everybody in that in between. And so that's really what it's looking like here. And so you have people like me who started off as the AI for everything, and then we're brought back to the reality that, like, hey, you might be exposing people's personally identifiable information. This isn't, approved by the larger beings like Virginia Community College System, the state, things like that. Federal regulations are saying you probably shouldn't be doing this. So people who kind of had to scale back, and then people who are really resistant and need kind of scale up, and then everything in between. What that looks like in the day-to-day is fascinating. That looks like, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, that looks like creating communities of practice to kind of expose people to what AI is. It looks like common readers. It looks like new committees for academic integrity and code of conduct. It looks like policies and procedure manual people and committees on committees and who's going to be on this. So it really is every breadth and scope of what you could think of might be happening is happening in this very large, diverse, divergent set of faculty, staff, and students as to how we are adopting and adapting to AI at the community college level.
And I will second what Cynthia had just said too. I think our trajectory very much followed that same path. I like to think about it in terms of 4 different stakeholder groups. I think our faculty, obviously concerned, apprehensive early on, I've been nothing but proud of our faculty over the last 18 months. I've been pleasantly surprised by the willingness to experiment with AI within course design, using AI-centric assignments in their classes across disciplines. And I think overall, just understanding that this is not a genie that can be put back in the bottle, and that there are going to be expectations once our graduates leave our campus that they have an understanding of what AI can do for their positions, for their jobs. So we've taken a very disciplinary specific approach to how it's integrated into the classroom. So that's the faculty side. I think staff, much more along the same lines as faculty. I think because our staff are working inside of, let's say, Workday or Microsoft 365, AI was baked into those enterprise software tools relatively early on. So I think they're still getting their feet wet and trying to figure out what can be done. But again, willing to embrace and experiment and all of that. I think our administrators, I don't want to say they've been the most difficult conversation, but there's a desire to navigate and to balance what our administration hears from our board of trustees. And I think our board of trustees very much wants us to kind of push forward fast, and in ways that I see value in it. But I think what we've seen, and I actually have to talk to the board of trustees next week, what we've seen from the private sector is really that you can't just throw a bunch of things at people and expect them to figure it out. It becomes very overwhelming, and the results just don't meet the expectations. The ROI just isn't that high. So having those conversations with our administrators, very fortunate to have great deans who are aware of what's happening and really kind of driving innovation in their colleges, and I can't thank them enough. And then the last one is really our students. I mean, I think our students, they're using it, but they're using it with a desire to have an expert explain to them the best ways to use it. And I think that's where our faculty really come in. They want to know how to use it, and they want to use it for something other than cheating or plagiarism. They want to know how to use it to expand their learning. They want to know how to use it for a course project, for collaborative projects, for teamwork, all of this stuff. And so I've been pleasantly surprised. Now I just need to kind of take that momentum and push us to the next level.
So, Sam, I'm going to stick with you here for a moment. You sort of laid out the different constituencies on your campus, the different stakeholder groups. How do you balance all of their separate needs? Because I would imagine each of those groups has a different need around AI adoption. So how do you handle all of those competing needs?
Yeah, so I think, taking each one and each stakeholder group as their own unique entity. I think faculty, now that we've built a culture in which folks are willing to embrace or at least experiment with AI, right? So that kind of, we knocked down that wall, and now it's more kind of passing the baton on to them and saying, you've got the basic understanding. If you want the tools, we'll make the tools available, right? It could be Copilot, could be Copilot Studio, could be ChatGPT, could be Claude. Now go work with your colleagues to try to figure out what is the best way to be implementing these within your assignments. Okay, so we've got that component. They're managing it, right? We've got working groups, community groups, or sharing groups that are sharing what they're learning with each other. Then we have our Center for Teaching, Learning, and Design that is really focused on how do we, I don't want to say AI proof, but how do we begin designing our courses in a way that lean more on the kind of skill development that has very little to do with AI, that AI can't replace. Collaboration, application of the theories or the content that they're learning in class. And so that group, the CTLD as we call it, they're doing the experimentation in that space, and they're working directly with faculty to try to plug in different kinds of assignments, different kinds of assessments into their in-person and online classes. And so they've kind of handled that, and I'm really more or less a support for both faculty and CTLD. They come to me if they need access to a different model, if they want to experiment with building a tool, let's say with a company that's not OpenAI, then I try to connect them with the right players. It's really, I think, staff is where we're focusing a lot on now. And so much of my attention is not staff specifically, but the operations that happen on the staff side. Working really, really closely now with our COO and our CTO, trying to figure out what is our next investment? what do we need to be spending? Where do we go? How do we prioritize? How do we govern? How do we scale? All of these things. And so I'm happy to say that the academic side, that's handling itself. And I'm so proud of our faculty who have recognized their expertise is not going to go away, but rather these are now tools that allow them to advance their expertise. And they're trying to share that with their students. And so, for me, most of my attention is really that kind of admin staff side and trying to figure out what are the big picture investments, the high level investments we need to make? How much is it? Is it worth making a big splash with a ChatGPT subscription? Should we go more towards a small model? And so getting in place the SOPs, if you will, for making those decisions is really where my attention is now. But I owe everything to our faculty for being willing to really embrace and experiment with this stuff. And so faculty got the students. I'll take care of the operations side as best I can. And that's where my attention's going now, Van.
Thanks, Sam. Cynthia, you have competing stakeholders at your campus as well with different needs. How are you managing that balance?
Well, the reality is managing it is a nice way of saying working our best way to do it. Every single student, faculty, staff member, community member, potential student, family member, they all have a different set of needs. And so what we're really doing is distilling down so much like a new student orientation. What does everybody need to be successful? Right? How are we balancing that? And so that's getting back to that foundation framework. I really think for us, when we think about what everybody needs, we're thinking about AI literacies. We're thinking about ethics and responsible use. We're thinking about just a basic understanding of technology. And then from there, building a framework that works for us on how to balance that out for each different case study, I guess, for our case example, for lack of better terms. So these are some things a faculty member could need. This is something that workforce development could need, and building it based on that. But at the end of the day, they all kind of have that core requirements. And I'm really leaning into, if we get anything right, if we can get ethics, responsible use, and AI literacy right, we really begin that balance conversation, because we're all building off of the same basic understanding and then going from there.
I am so glad that you brought up ethical and responsible use, Cynthia. One of the things that we talk to institutions about is the need for ethical and responsible use guidelines. How are you tackling that conversation at NOVA?
So it's not just like any of these other conversation points. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So part of it is really creating that policy. Now, an AI policy is kind of why we're here today, right? What does the policy of it all look like? But policies are things that are very fixed, right? They're not flexible. They're very rigid. They're very black and white. And we already have a lot of policies that cover AI, right? We have exposing students PII, FERPA, FOIA, all kinds of cybersecurity, all kinds of things that we shouldn't or shouldn't do with students' information and data and things of that nature. So we really don't need a policy there per se, but we need an understanding of what that looks like within those policies. So more of a procedural approach to ethics. So for instance, what are the implications for using a tool? Who does it stand to benefit or harm? When we use the tool, what happens to the information? These are basic literacy conversations that we had back in the day when we switched from library cards to the internet, right? And when we switched from Encyclopedia Britannica to the internet, we had to figure these things out. These aren't new questions. It's the same stuff. What are we exposing? And to be honest, I think that policies might age out really well. So it's that ethical framework. And then to making sure everybody knows that ethical framework, from the person working in your financial department to the person working the front desk to students in your classroom, and rolling it out in a way that everybody understands what you're asking of them. one of the things we're doing is trying to embed, and not in every class, because remember, we have academic freedom and faculty autonomy. We can't embed it in every class. But what could it look like for you to discuss this in your syllabus? And how do you discuss it in a way where students understand that you're talking about ethics, but you don't use the word ethics? If this is your first time to college, you might not know what the word ethics means. You might not know what the word plagiarism means or cheating. And so really breaking it down, we don't share our work here. We don't take our work from the computer and say it's our own work, and really spelling it out for them so that every student understands the expectation. Understanding it that the way faculty use it, AI also has to be done ethically and responsibility. What happens when you put a student's paper in this third-party AI detection engine that you found off the side of the road? Where does that information go? Who does that stand to benefit? And again, even some things as simple as transcripts. How do we evaluate transcripts ethically and responsibly? It's making sure that those implications are discussed at every single level and through every single lens. I will say I'm new to it. I only have 2 years experience, and you're like, that seems like a lot more than I have. Maybe it is, but I'm really leaning on the experts outside to help me build this for myself for ethical implications. I'm going to do a shout out to a presenter that WCET had last week, and that's Angela Gunder. Her and her peers, Josh Heron, Nicole Weber, Colette Shelf, and Sherry Burr, will put together Dimensions of AI Literacy. It's a free course you can take through Open Culture, and it knocked my socks off. I have little socks on and little sock stirrups, and it knocked my socks off because it made it in such a digestible way of how do I do these ethics from a cultural lens, from a civic lens, from a confidence lens, so that even if Cynthia doesn't understand the ethics of it, it's still being covered. So with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Okay, and Sam, before I ask you the same question, I just want to put a plug in. Dr. Gunder is doing some work for WCET. We'll be releasing a white paper in the next couple of weeks that she wrote that looks at AI literacy frameworks from an open education perspective. And I'm thrilled to say that thanks to our partners at D2L, she'll also be working on a AI literacy playbook for us that we'll release at the end of the year. But Sam, I know that you've also had some of these conversations about ethical guidelines, and you have some legal guidelines from the state of Colorado that you have to take into consideration. How are you handling this at your institution?
Yeah, so as Van kind of mentioned there, there we go. The state of Colorado, our legislators have forced our hand a little bit. So we've had to be prepared to be very transparent about how AI is being used at the institution. The good thing is where it's being used is often kind of baked into these enterprise systems that have provided the documentation necessary to articulate how it's being used. So there is that check in place. I think what I would say has saved me a significant amount of time is kind of what Cynthia had alluded to there, which is that we had policies in place already. We had a data policy. Thank you very much to our data analytics team for having that in place. We had an IT related policy that covered this. And so we looked at the landscape of what existed, including academic policies, and realized very quickly all of our things that all the boxes we needed to check are in place. And for us, it was more or less organizing these policies that were already in existence into a place that folks could access. And believe it or not, leveraging AI to translate very, very legal policy language into language that folks could understand. And so, from a policy perspective, a governance perspective, we've kind of covered our bases. We're really allowing the ethical conversations to happen at the classroom level. That is a conversation that we've asked our faculty to have with their students. Every faculty member has to have some sort of AI statement. What that statement is up to them. You can use it, you can not use it, but they have to clarify exactly what that means. And we've recognized that those initial conversations that are happening on the first or second day of class are giving students more of an ethical foundation and an understanding of what it means to act ethically than anything that could ever come from the top about it. Right? It's disciplinary specific. Right? It's it comes from a person that they're beginning to trust. And so that's the tack that I'm taking, and I think I'll continue to take, which is where appropriate, make sure our data is safe. Make sure that folks aren't throwing any personally identifiable information into larger publicly available models. But thus far, we haven't had really any concern. And so I think to me, this is a lot like teaching people how to use the internet and how to use the internet ethically. The internet's been around, and there's a lot of unethical behavior on the internet. I don't think we're going to wipe any of that out anytime soon. I don't think we're going to do the same thing with AI. We just hope that our students and our faculty and our staff are operating with an awareness of the implications of responsible and ethical use.
I love that, Sam, that, internet's been around a long time, and we by far haven't reached a conclusion on how to ethically and responsibly use the internet. So why should we assume that AI, so young at our institutions, would be able to do the same thing? I think in that vein, can you talk a little bit, Sam, about the biggest challenges that you've faced as you've been approaching this from an institutional perspective?
The energy, as I mentioned, is there. I think the academic side taken care of. Feel really confident about that. We've now reached a place, Van, where we've got to start prioritizing our next projects. And I think it's a kind of prioritization that nobody's really has experience in. We're not like, what's the rubric look like? How do we decide where to go next? Because it's not, I mean, yes, it's expensive to invest in this, but when you're taking on projects one-on-one and you're saying, let's build this tool and then let's build this tool, the financing is not as significant, I think, as saying, let's give everybody access to ChatGPT, right? It's a different kind of animal, but it still requires a lot of conversation with a lot of different stakeholders, because there might be the VP of Student Affairs who says, I want to build a bot that does our student journey from A to Z and a student can use it. Whereas somebody in our data shop saying, no, I want to build a tool that does some automated reporting and provides conversational access to our institutional data. Those are two very, very, very valuable and worthy projects, but we have to decide what comes first, how we evaluate it. Do we scale it? Do we kill it? All of this. And this is the new territory that I'm jumping into as we start the fall 25 semester.
Cynthia, what are the challenges that you're dealing with over at Nova?
Well, I keep picking on us for being bureaucratic. We're a state agency, right? So we are slow. And it's not that we want to be slow. It's just that we are built slow. We are part of the state system. We work within a governance of 23 community colleges where we're supposed to look for leadership from the VCCS board that trickles down to the Nova board, that trickles down to our president, and there's just ripple effect. While that is happening, the workforce is demanding that our students have AI literacy, right? And if you actually, EAB just published some work, and they said in the last 2 years, 600 applications went up 644% of asking people if they have AI competencies. So the workforce is demanding to even get an interview for you to have AI literacy. And yet our governance is slow as molasses. They're still talking about whether or not we need a policy system wide, right? So how do we marry the two? And I think that's the biggest challenge is, and it kind of goes back to, for community college, if anyone had to create pathways to the community college, it was the same thing. We didn't have time to wait for pathways to be developed. We had to develop them, or our students were not going to be able to get into four-year colleges or get jobs. And so at this point, our biggest challenge is saying we don't have the luxury of waiting. We don't have the luxury of saying, the state's going to give us guidance, whether it's on AI, whether it's on Title II, whether it's on the next du jour. We have to do this for our students to get employed. And so it's that change management of within. How do you turn on a dime to make it happen, but maybe it happens strategically and ethically and responsibly? And how do you make sure that this isn't just another fad? And we saw that with virtual reality. Virtual reality, I was one of those people who was like, well, this is the future and it's happening. Let's put all of our eggs in this basket. And it did. It was Second Life. It was a big dud versus AI isn't that right? And so this is not, it's beyond just the innovators having courage to have these courageous conversations. It's getting everybody to have these courageous conversations and for the change management to say, this is the new normal and we need to get on board or prepare for retirement or to become obsolete, which we don't have that luxury. And so that's what I think is the biggest challenge. And so it's really getting down to the personalities, right? Really finding to the core what are people's values and belief systems, and how can we align our resources, values, and beliefs with this new technology, really, this new tool that is really changing our workforce.
So I'm going to stick with you here for a minute, Cynthia, and I'm cheating because I've had great conversations with both Cynthia and Sam, so I kind of know what they're going to say here, and I want to make sure that y'all hear it. You've done some really interesting stuff with AI at Nova. Could you tell us a little bit about your current or your future use of AI? What are you doing with it on campus?
Well, we're very lucky because under the leadership of Dr. Kress, and who's our president, and Dr. Chang, who's our vice president of academic affairs, they really push this idea of you need to touch it. Right? You need to touch it. And they've been incentivizing using artificial intelligence. So it started off with this grant last year, where it was like, we have $100,000. You can apply to up to $25,000. What do you got? And so for me, I said, well, what drives me nuts? Now, I was a transcript evaluator for years, and you use, I don't know if you've recognized these things. These are called highlighters. You print it off and you take this piece of paper and you literally highlight which classes will transfer. Unfortunately, here we are 20 years later, and the technology really hasn't changed. This guy is the backbone of our transcript evaluation process. And that simply is silly because we have PDFs on PDFs and electronic documents on top of electronic documents of catalogs from colleges across the nation. And so what we're doing right now is using some of that money to build artificial intelligence to data mine these catalogs that are, again, from the 60s, and saying, will this transfer? And instead of using this to transcribe that information, pulling it in, populating it, and then having a human, someone who has agency, to say, does this look right and does this make sense? So just something simple as, data mine stuff that we already have and putting it in the computer is doing it. We're also, I just found out recently this last week that we are going to incentivize through our Center of Advancement in Teaching Excellence, really getting this into the classroom. So it's one thing for administrators to put on their hats and saying, like, these are some fun things we can do, but let's get it to the people who need to use it most, because they're the ones who are touching our students. And so our Center for Advancing Teacher Excellence, under the leadership of Dr. Indigo Erickson, is going to be incentivizing discipline groups to make micro-credentials within it. Now, it doesn't count if you're already IET, right? We don't want the people who are already doing AI in the classroom to do it. But what would it look like for communications? What could it look like for business? What could it look like for hospitality or veterinary services to have an AI micro-credentials baked into it? And then last but not least, we're just playing with the technology, right? Really incentivizing play by bringing in guest speakers, by bringing in people to teach us different things, showing us how to break it, pushing our envelope and getting us outside of our comfort zone and saying, what could you do? That's cool that you're doing this. Now, what could you do? I think the next step for us is really taking that out of our faculty, staff, and administrators' hands and just saying, all right, students, let's do an experiential learning conference. What are you doing with AI? Why am I coming up with all the answers? I think that I just had that idea while we're in this conversation. So patent pending, everybody, anyone who wants to steal it. But why am I doing all the dirty work here? Let's ask them what's the future of AI and have them do it. And so that's why it's important to have these conversations multiple times with your colleagues, your creatives, because that's how fast an idea comes. So yeah, maybe that's the future.
I love that. Sam, how are y'all using it right now or planning on using it?
Yeah, so I mean, a few things are either finished or going to be finished very, very soon. We have an AI literacy course being built by faculty and staff for faculty and staff. That'll go live on the 2nd of September. We're just tweaking a few things, and I need to put together a certificate of completion. That is why it's slow. Apparently, that's my responsibility. But everybody else did the work. I will do that. We are moving from phase 1 to phase 2 of Rowdy's Roadmap, is what we are calling it. We're very fortunate to have it's small language model company, Bast AI here in Denver. They have a model that is known as an explainable AI. It allows a user to basically trace back to the source of providence of an output, right? So we can kind of trace to figure out where did it come from. And so for us, right, as we are throwing 25, 30 years of course catalogs in there into one machine, right? It's very important for us and our advisors in particular to know exactly where the answer came from. So that is phase 2 is going to be the development of a data dashboard for our deans and our AVPs. It shows real-time data on how the chatbot's being used. So that way, if there are, let's say, big problems that happen registration week, maybe it's holds, maybe it's financial aid, they're going to be able to see that in real time, getting a lot of questions about this and be able to make decisions or adapt appropriately. Phase 3 is without a doubt the stickiest of wickets. We want to open this thing up to students. We want students to be able to get very, very tailored and specific responses to advising type questions. So that way, whatever is needed from our advisors is very, very thoughtful, deep, human-centric kind of communication, collaboration with students. I mean, a bot might be able to say, this is the next course in your rotation. It's available at this time, but a bot is probably not going to be very good at helping a student navigate the complexities of having a sick mom at home. And so we want to give advisors that time to really excel and to share the knowledge and the empathy that they have. And then the one I'm most excited about because I'm a sports guy. We just built a compliance tool for our athletic directors. We've got one AD and then a few underneath. Our athletics department had to cut a little bit of funding. D2, it's one of those things that happened. And rather than hiring a new athletics director focused on compliance, our AD, Todd Thurman, said, can you build something with AI that basically just answers questions based on the NCAA Division II compliance tool or manual? And I said, let's try it. And yesterday they got access to it and the coaches have been blowing it up. And it's pretty awesome because I know it sounds small, but there was one person in athletics who was getting 25, 30 questions a day via text or email and having to answer them. And no longer does he have to worry about that. So what can Jared now do with that time? And I think I'm really excited about that. What's to come? I think we are currently developing a course development tool in collaboration with our CTLD, our Center for Teaching, Learning, and Design. It allows them to basically say, here are the course standards that we at MSU Denver agree to, kind of combination of quality matters as well as our own. They can bake in those founding principles into the bot. The bot will answer questions based on those founding principles. And then we'll actually allow faculty a little bit of that kind of instructional design support that would normally require somebody to go and schedule time with an ID. A faculty member who's building a class 48 hours before the start of the semester, and I know there are probably a few of you on this call because I am one. it's hard to go get an appointment, but what are some of the basics that we might leverage AI to just kind of help develop? And so I'm very excited about that. And then lastly, just got support from our president. We're going to launch an AI advisory board in about a month and a half with business leaders across Denver, from across sectors, and we're going to meet every quarter and basically just discuss, what are you seeing, how are you using it, but also what are you expecting from your employees in terms of uses. And I'm really, really excited about that because I think a lot of the time we conjecture, we assume we know what's happening in industry, but industry struggling with it as much as the rest of us, and I think they want to know where to use it. And so, really excited to kind of hear back from those business owners, the CEOs, VPs, to see what they're recommending for our students and how they're using it in their own businesses.
I love that. Judith, I know you wanted to jump in here as well.
Well, Van, we're hearing so many exciting things that are going on in campuses, and the survey data support that in many, many ways. But one thing perspective I wanted to bring into this is that we did have 18% of our survey respondents are at what we consider small institutions, enrollments of 2,999 FTE or less. And so I just wanted to take a moment to lift up the voices of less resourced or under-resourced institutions and come back to that question of challenges that some of our campuses, particularly our smaller campuses, are seeing. A number of those respondents underscored the costs of AI tools and platforms, as well as what that investment, if they did invest in AI tools and platforms, would take away from other initiatives. One survey respondent said, "We're a small school and we simply don't have the resources to either develop our own tools or to purchase external tools, and it's a concern." Another one says that the focus will remain on AI and what highly resourced institutions are doing. It's easy, they put that in quotes, because they're using their resources, time, expertise, and dollars to stay on the edge of what's possible. We don't have those resources. So how are we supposed to support our students in the use of AI? So I think we really, everyone take a look at that report, because it does show a wide range and broad perspective on the kinds of concerns and challenges, but also exciting work that institutions are engaging in. Thanks, Van.
No, that's a great call out, Judith. We have one last question. I have one last question for our panelists, and then we've got a few questions in the Q&A. I would urge you keep populating that Q&A. We won't get to quite everything, but we'll at least get to a couple of them. But my last question to Cynthia and Sam, real quickly, what's one piece of advice that you would give someone that is working on AI on their campus? And Sam, I'll start with you.
You have to commit time to messing around with one of these models. You really truly do. You have to figure out how you want to interact with it. You have to figure out what kind of responses, outputs do you want. What we're learning is that every experience is so individualized. Like, this is where the human comes in. How I use ChatGPT, that's my go-to because it just has been since day one. It's completely different than how my office manager uses it. Just totally different, right? We can share, we can, share prompts, we can talk about what we're learning, but it's still going to remain so specific. That's the beauty of these things, right? And the beauty, utility, right? I shouldn't call it beautiful. Sorry to all the creatives out there. That's not what I intended. So I think practice. One more thing, Van, I think it relates to, Judith's comments there. It's time to start thinking about where we can collaborate with other institutions of higher education to cut these costs down. Right? I mean, these tools can process a lot of data, which means you can put guardrails on them and say, for this university, it's only going to access these, and for this university, it's only going to access this. We have to start looking to each other to build products together that meet our specific needs, but that can cut down some of those costs because they're going to function the same way. And even right in Colorado, our Department of Higher Education, we need to be looking to them and saying, what funds do you have? What can we build in collaboration with you that's going to meet a lot of our needs? And I hope we see more of that in the future.
I love that. Practice, play, and collaboration. Cynthia, what's your one piece of advice for folks?
I think it's just to remind yourself that you're not in this alone. There is so much research already done. Don't recreate the wheel. Come to free events, use free resources. There were at least 10 resources shared today in the chat that are just about different frameworks, right? Different AI literacies. You don't have to start from scratch or do it alone. So rely on what's been done by reputable sources, and then tailor it to what works uniquely for your faculty, students, and staff. You really can make it customizable. And so again, shout out for AI literacies. If you take anything away from this presentation, it's that you need to look into AI literacies, but don't do it alone.
I love that. I want to get to a couple of questions in the chat, and my apologies, we won't get to quite all of them. But we did have one question that I thought was really interesting here. On the non-credit side of your institutions, and Cynthia, this may be more for NOVA than Metropolitan State, but on the non-credit side of your institutions, are employers approaching you to develop AI literacy courses or certificates or micro-credentials to help the existing workforce upskill?
So I'm glad you asked. They're not approaching us because we've already done it. So we have a unique situation. We are right outside of Washington, D.C., and about 400,000 federal workers were laid off. And so now we have a competitive job market. We still have people who need jobs, but now the labor market is a bunch of people who have tons of experience in something else. Maybe they've been at their job for 30, 40 years, and they're going back in. And we said, well, what are we hearing from all employers? Going back to those job applications, they know they need AI literacy, right? And so we said, we're not going to wait for them to come to us. We see it in the applications, what they're asking in applications. And so we built on our workforce side some one-off classes and then some micro credentials. So we have a little bit of both and certificates, because what we're trying to do is upskill the community so everybody can be competitive, whether you were recently laid off or whether this is your first round. You've been a homemaker for the last 20 years, and it's time for you to go out into the world and after you've sent your kids off to college. We want both demographics to have an opportunity to have social and economic mobility. So our workforce does that. If you want to learn more about that program, I recommend looking up Nova Next, because Nova is also helping community members to pay for that, since that is an expectation in this very competitive community.
So Nova Next, I love that.
Nova Next. I'll put it in the chat. Let's be real. I love the chat feature.
Very good. Sam, this next question's for you. I really like this. You talked about how you're requiring all of your faculty to have an AI usage statement in their syllabus so that students know when it's appropriate to use AI. Are you requiring or having conversations with your faculty about their need to be transparent with students about when they use AI?
That has been, not to toot my own horn, Van, that is something that I've said from day one. As we've gone down this route, you can't be telling students they can't use it and then using it on your own and not telling them. You just can't. It's completely, it's unethical. So our faculty, thus far, from what I've heard, right now, I'm not in every classroom, I'm not looking at every syllabus, but they do understand that. They do understand it. We have a very diverse faculty body, but we have a lot of younger faculty who have, kind of learned and had to come about and mature at a time when social media was exploding. So they understand the importance of being transparent when it comes to the human technology relationship. But yeah, we expect them to be transparent if they're using it. because if they can't be transparent, that's a problem. It's unethical.
I love that. When we talk with institutions about ethical frameworks, transparency is always one of the ones that part of one of those frameworks that we talk about. So one last question, and it's a doozy. So I apologize for ending with a big one. But would one of you like to take a crack at predicting the future and to what extent you think AI is going to impact the future of learning? Told you it was a doozy.
I love a good challenge. Jump in.
Go for it, Sam.
This is the stuff that keeps me up at night. So we are going to have to completely redesign our assessment approach. AI and how AI makes knowledge accessible is as significant, I truly believe this, since probably the internet. It's And even then, I think it maybe is as significant as I don't know. I don't want to say the book. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And it's showing us that things like cumulative multiple choice exams and strengthening our rote memory muscles are not really valuable anymore. What becomes extremely valuable, and this excites me as somebody with a background in rhetoric and argumentation, is it's going to recenter the human in amazing ways, right? Like if you can't talk to somebody, if you can't argue productively about a really, really tense topic, you're going to be shown very, very quick. And I'll leave with this example to kind of iterate and I think I don't say prove, but add some value or some substance to what I just said. I was talking to one of our computer science professors last week. Dan Pittman's his name, and he's been going around the country and talking to other computer scientists and computer science programs. And he was my partner very early on in all of this, and really the kind of person I go to and ask, "Am I crazy?" Right? And he said, in relation to computer science, it's going to make it already has made the best coders who are already 10 times faster than the other ones, 30 times faster. So the need for the entry level coder, yeah, it's probably not going to come back. What's going to be interesting though, and he really pointed it out, it's still going to take somebody who can take a client's idea and translate it into an application that not everybody can do. You have to be able to ask the right questions. You have to be able to really articulate or get them to articulate their goals. And I think that is the personal, that is the collaborative, that is the human element that I get really excited about because I don't think it goes away.
I love that. Cynthia, I'm going to give you the last word just real quickly before we turn it over to Megan. Where do you think the future of learning is going with AI?
I think it's customization, improved experience for each individual learner. The more divergent the personality and skill sets and languages and culture, the more opportunities to bring learning to the forefront. And I'm just really excited about it because I think it is such an instructional tool that is really gonna in some ways create barriers because of digital access and things like that, but in other ways really improve outcomes for people who maybe wouldn't otherwise have access to the rich level of education. And as we see, I'm going to say for community colleges, students less and less interested in transferring to 4 years and more interested in going into the workforce, really having that that economic and social mobility gaps close faster and faster, because again, you can data mine from some of the greatest resources with very little critical thinking skills. And then the better your critical thinking skills are, adapt. And so really having more opportunities for people who otherwise wouldn't have opportunities to access education, learning, and opportunities in the workforce.
I love that.
I know, it's really exciting.
Judith, Cynthia, Sam, thank you so much for being with us today and having this conversation with us. Megan, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Great. Thank you, Van. And thank you to our speakers. Thank you for the fantastic discussion in the chat. It was fun to try and stay connected with everything that was happening. We will be pulling out those resources and sharing those with a link to the recording next week, as well as a link to our report. And if you haven't already made your reservation to join us in Denver for our WCET conference, which will also include the SAN coordinator convening and the annual summit for women in e-learning, make sure to register and join us. All these superstars are going to be there in person IRL, so you can connect with them there. And I want to just quickly acknowledge our WCET sponsors. They underwrite much of our events and programs here at WCET, and without them, we couldn't do what we do. I also want to give a shout out to Harmonize and Perlego that also just came on as sponsors. And lastly, our WCET supporting members that are committed on a higher level and continue to provide their expertise into our work. So we are very grateful for all they do for us as well. So if you're not a member of WCET, you know where to find me, and I'm happy to connect you with the details about joining our wonderful community. So with that, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. And again, thank you to our speakers and thank you, Van Davis. Take care.